Why Martin Luther's excommunication can't be lifted.
After the Second Vatican Council, which closed in 1965, Catholicism launched a major reconciliation movement. This movement had a huge impact throughout the ecumenical Christian world. It included almost all mainstream Christian denominations. It even included the ancient Oriental Orthodox Churches. These were previously considered heretical by mainstream Christianity. Strangely, Catholicism seemed to forgive everyone. But it did not revoke the excommunication order. This order was against Martin Luther from the 16th century Reformation movement.
Christian Grand Reconciliation.
Vatican II marked a significant shift. It changed the Catholic Church's attitude. This applied to other Christian denominations and sects. Before this, the Catholic Church considered itself the only true church. It was founded by Christ. Other separated Christian groups should return to the Roman Church. However, Vatican II passed the Decree on Ecumenism. This explicitly stated the ecumenical movement is a key concern for the Church. The decree acknowledged elements of sanctification and truth exist in other Christian communities. It encouraged Catholics to build closer relationships. This was done through dialogue, cooperation, and common prayer. They engaged with separated brothers and sisters. The goal was to achieve full Christian unity. This doesn't mean the Catholic Church abandoned its traditional doctrines. Instead, it sought reconciliation. This was with different Christian groups. It adopted a more active, flexible, open, understanding, and respectful attitude. This comprehensive effort for reconciliation included theological dialogue. It involved Orthodox, Protestant, Anglican, and ancient Oriental Orthodox churches, among others. On December 7, 1965, just before Vatican II closed, Pope Paul VI of Rome and Patriarch Athenagoras, leader of the Orthodox Church of Constantinople, issued a joint statement. They announced the revocation of mutual excommunications. These had lasted over 9 centuries. On October 31, 1999, representatives from the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity of the Holy See, they and the Lutheran World Federation signed the Joint Declaration on the Doctrine of Justification. This was a milestone event. Several other mainstream Protestant denominations also signed and endorsed it. Some views suggest the Reformation originated in Germany. Both world wars also originated in Germany. These 3 major historical events all occurred in Germany. This is probably not accidental. Perhaps these 2 world wars were God's curse on the Reformation. Of course, this is just some people's individual thoughts. There's no direct evidence. The grand reconciliation of Christianity, including lifting excommunications, falls within the framework of contradictions among the people. Contradictions between ourselves and the enemy are certainly not included.
Lifting excommunication.
The Catholic Church lifted the excommunication against the Orthodox Church, but it did not lift the excommunication against Martin Luther. This is an extremely sensitive topic. There must be profound reasons behind it. First, about the first excommunication. In 1054, the Roman Pope and the Patriarch of Constantinople mutually excommunicated each other. This led to the Great Schism. This division was clearly caused by the split of the Roman Empire. The ostensible reasons were doctrinal differences such as the Filioque clause and liturgical and customary differences. Also, the primacy of the Roman pontiff were all pretexts. In 1965, during the Second Vatican Council, Pope Paul VI and ecumenical Patriarch Athenagoras mutually lifted the 1054 excommunications. This was seen as an important step to promote Christian unity. It aimed to repair the long-standing rift between Eastern and Western churches. Lifting excommunication didn't mean the 2 churches completely merged, but it symbolized their willingness to open dialogue. It recognized each other's Christian identity and sought greater communion. In fact, Catholicism and Orthodoxy had to brief periods of communion historically. In the 16th century, Martin Luther publicly posted big character posters. He launched a cultural revolution-style Reformation movement. He opposed some practices of the Catholic Church at the time, especially the selling of indulgences. He proposed core doctrines like justification by faith and Scripture alone. He stubbornly refused the Holy See's demand to retract his claims. Finally, in 1521, he was excommunicated by Pope Leo X. He was also declared an outlaw by the Holy Roman Empire. Martin Luther violated organizational principles. He unilaterally and publicly posted big character posters. He challenged the authority of the Catholic Church. This included many core doctrines and traditions. For example, papal authority, the importance of sacraments, the relationship between good works and salvation. Also, the Church's role as a mediator of salvation. These disagreements were fundamental. Unlike the East-West schism, which was more about secular political interference, Martin Luther didn't just question individual actions of the Pope. He directly challenged the Pope's supreme authority in the Church. He believed the Pope's authority couldn't supersede the Bible. This contradicts the Catholic Church's emphasis. It stresses the Pope's primacy and infallibility. He is the successor of Peter, the chief apostle. The split between Orthodoxy and Catholicism, though profound, still maintained apostolic succession. They also kept 7 sacraments and many other common beliefs and church structures. They are considered sister churches. Martin Luther's reform led to the birth of Protestant churches. These churches and the Catholic Church have fundamental differences. These include doctrine, sacraments, and governance. Lutheranism, established in Martin Luther's name, and the Catholic Church are two separate religious entities. The Catholic Church believes some of Martin Luther's claims were heresy. That is, they deviated from the truth believed by the Church. Although in recent years, Catholicism and some Protestant denominations, especially Lutheranism, have engaged in theological dialogue. They reached consensus on doctrines like justification. However, to completely lift Martin Luther's excommunication would mean the Catholic Church admits Luther's doctrines are orthodox. This seems completely impossible. In summary, between Catholicism and Orthodoxy, it's like brothers quarreling and dividing property. But with Martin Luther, it's different paths, no shared purpose. These are all official statements. Actually, the real reason is Martin Luther was a grassroots priest. He was carefully cultivated by the Catholic Church. His defiant actions against leadership organizationally classify him as a traitor. Humanity has always intensely detested traitors. The cruelty shown to traitors often surpasses that shown to enemies. Moreover, even enemies despise traitors of the opposing side. Just based on Martin Luther's traitorous behavior, the Holy See of the Catholic Church would absolutely not revoke his excommunication.
Instances of punishing traitors.
In Dante's Inferno the lowest, coldest, ninth circle of hell, it is reserved for betrayers. There, Satan is chewing on 3 sinners. They are Judas, who betrayed Jesus, and Brutus and Cassius, who betrayed Caesar. In Christian culture, Judas's act of betrayal is the most infamous. His sin of selling out Jesus is considered unforgivable. Thus, he suffers the most extreme torture in hell. This is far more severe than public persecutors are punished. During World War II, people in many occupied countries held great hatred. This was against their own citizens who collaborated with Germany. For example, Vidkun Quisling of Norway established a puppet regime after the German invasion. His name later became synonymous with traitor. After the war, many German collaborators were executed. This reflected society's zero tolerance for internal rebellion. Their actions were considered the most severe harm to the nation and its people. In Chinese history and literary works, the punishment for internal traitors is also extremely severe. For instance, in palace intrigues, wars, and gang stories, internal betrayers are often more detested than external enemies. They are depicted as treacherous, cunning, and perfidious villains. Their endings are often miserable. From this, it is clear. Martin Luther can never be forgiven by the Catholic Church. No pope would dare revoke his excommunication. Whoever dares revoke it should not be pope. They should go home and play with their grandchildren. Nevertheless, the Catholic Holy See did show some leniency towards Martin Luther.
Fortunate Martin Luther.
In 1521, the Edict of Worms, issued by Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, Martin Luther was formally declared a heretic and would face severe punishment. The terms of the Edict of Worms clearly stipulated, condemned Martin Luther as a heretic. His writings were prohibited and destroyed, declared him an enemy of the empire. This meant anyone could kill him without legal responsibility. Offered a reward for his arrest, the edict encouraged anyone who found or arrested Luther. It promised generous rewards. At the same time, anyone who offered him help or shelter would also be punished. The peculiarity here lies in generous rewards. The deeper meaning is there probably isn't much material reward. At most, a glorious title. This was intended to exert immense pressure on Martin Luther. It also prevented others from killing him. If they genuinely wanted his life, generous rewards would be changed to a specific number. For example, 10,000 taels of gold. Then, a great reward brings brave men. It's believed it wouldn't take long. Martin Luther would either die by a bounty hunter's gun or by an extremist's knife. Of course, most likely, he would die at the hands of guards or servants sent by Frederick III, because Frederick III, Elector of Saxony, who protected Luther, was a devout Catholic his entire life. Frederick III must have both hated Martin Luther's heretical doctrines, but also liked his spirit of defying authority. Frederick was worried about how to weaken the Holy Roman Emperor's power. He wanted to strengthen his own princely states. Some of Luther's proposals were exactly what Frederick wanted. Thus, Luther was unknowingly used and made a pawn. Just based on Martin Luther's refusal of the Holy See's multiple attempts to save him, the Catholic Holy See could absolutely not revoke his excommunication. With such a stubborn personality, does this mean Martin Luther had a low IQ?
Martin Luther's IQ and EQ.
IQ and EQ are two important dimensions for measuring personal ability and potential. They are both distinct and related. They jointly influence a person's fate. IQ primarily measures a person's cognitive ability. High IQ individuals usually excel in academia and in professional fields requiring extensive knowledge and skills, such as scientific research and engineering technology. EQ primarily measures a person's ability to manage emotions and handle interpersonal relationships. IQ is rational, cognitive ability. EQ is irrational, emotional ability. A high IQ doesn't mean high EQ, and vice versa. For example, some high IQ people may be socially awkward, while some high EQ people may not achieve academic success. It seems, for Martin Luther, his IQ was not low, but his EQ was not high. If he had high EQ, he wouldn't be easily used by others, and then have all the blame placed on his own head. For example, Martin Luther advocated reform against schism. As a result, the princes implemented cuius regio, ius religio, whose realm, his religion. But they turned the enormous sin of schism into a several-ton medal. This was placed on Martin Luther's body. To this day, most Protestants still believe that Martin Luther heroically successfully split the church. In fact, with a little thought, it becomes clear. Martin Luther was just a scholar. He was powerless. Even if he had the evil intention and the courage to split the religion, did he have the ability? Martin Luther firmly opposed naming the church after himself, but they still used Lutheranism to name the first separated church. Even now, Martin Luther's followers still worship him as a savior. For the political correctness of the ecumenical movement, this certainly increases his culpability. This is nothing less than flattery to death, just based on Martin Luther's shrewdness in small matters and foolishness in big matters. The Catholic Holy See could absolutely not revoke his excommunication. Martin Luther lived every day in fear of being hunted. It would be against nature if he wasn't depressed.
Severely depressed Martin Luther.
Martin Luther suffered from severe depression. He himself often described his immense spiritual struggles and pain. He called these attacks. These attacks were not just mental lows. They came with intense loneliness, also doubt about God's grace, guilt, and fear of hell and death. He would experience dark nights of the soul. Physically, he would have tremors, sweating, palpitations. These are clinical symptoms of depression. However, in that era, the term depression did not exist. During his monastery days, Martin Luther was tormented by anxiety over salvation. Even after discovering the doctrine of justification by faith, he was still occasionally plagued by these spiritual attacks. He felt abandoned by God. He had great doubt about his faith and reform work, even despair. His depression often came with physical pain, such as insomnia, loss of appetite, and exhaustion. Despite such suffering, Martin Luther did not become decadent. Instead, he fought this black dog through prayer. Also, by studying the Bible and communicating with friends. And through music, he was also an excellent composer and hymn writer. For example, the famous "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God" was written during his depressive period. Historical records mention he fell into Great Depression with overwhelming questions about his calling. "I have been near the gates of death and hell for over a week. Surrounded by all my companions, I still feel fear and trembling. Christ completely ignores me. I tremble in despair and blasphemy against God." This shows he experienced extreme mental pain, fear, despair, and self-doubt. These are significant manifestations of depressive symptoms. He was very afraid of being cut off from God because of his sinfulness. This persistent and deep sense of guilt and fear, especially in a religious context, can lead to long-term low mood and self-abasement. Records mention his overwork led to various illnesses. While this is not directly a symptom of depression, long-term mental stress often comes with physical exhaustion. And physical ailments, in turn, can worsen depression. His mention of death and hell reflects an anxiety about ultimate destiny. This shares commonalities with the pessimistic thinking and thoughts of death common in depressed patients. Just based on Martin Luther's stubbornness, knowing the difficulties, yet not retreating, and deliberately transgressing, the Catholic Holy See would absolutely not revoke his excommunication. With such chronic illnesses, Martin Luther surprisingly chose to marry. This raises questions about his moral conduct.
Martin Luther's marriage.
Martin Luther was excommunicated. So, he became a secular person. Marriage should be no problem. But he himself did not secularize. Instead, he continued his priestly duties and even became a religious leader. So, marrying before Protestantism was born seems to lack legal basis. Some argue Martin Luther's marriage was inappropriate in both secular and religious aspects. Secularly, Martin Luther was riddled with illness and emotionally depressed. Crucially, he lived daily in white terror of being killed at any time. This seems irresponsible towards his family, wife, and children. Despite this, he still had 6 children. Only one barely lived to his 60s, the rest either died young or prematurely. These are certainly related to his family's living environment. Martin Luther himself lived to 62, just barely to his 60s. His wife, Katharina von Bora, did not reach her 60s. She died early, in a carriage accident. Historically, her death is understated and glossed over. So, later generations don't know if it was a deliberate murder or an error in carriage operation due to hasty escape. However, overloading and speeding were probably unavoidable. Otherwise, the carriage would certainly not have overturned itself. Religiously, Martin Luther, as a former Catholic priest, must have taken a lifelong vow of chastity, because this is a necessary condition for ordination. Later, although he was expelled from the Catholic Church, the vow of chastity was his personal oath. It was unrelated to secularization. So, his marriage definitely violated the vow of chastity. That means directly defying God. Objectively speaking, the Catholic Church's prohibition of priestly marriage has its serious considerations. Because a married priest is like a licentious monk, he pursues spiritual chastity as a saint, yet also enjoys secular pleasures, that is, genuine corruption. Crucially, marriage is the grave of love. So what if a couple's relationship is strained and they want a divorce? What if the children are unworthy? Can priestly family members maintain lifelong, absolute poverty? Statistics show that in the U.S., Protestant pastors have a divorce rate as high as 1/4. Priestly divorce is a disaster for both church and individual. For the church, the priest's example collapses overnight. It gives the impression that it's all hypocritical performance. For the individual, a pastor who has studied his whole life, besides chanting scriptures, has no secular survival skills. So, once secularized, it's difficult to support oneself. Orthodoxy also allows married priests, but married priests are not eligible to become bishops. And whether divorced or widowed, priests cannot remarry. Therefore, Martin Luther's marriage was certainly criticized. The most likely criticism was selfishness and irresponsibility. Martin Luther's wedding took place about 4 weeks after the Battle of Frankenhausen, May 15, 1525, the final struggle of the German Peasants War. This timing also made Luther's marriage full of controversy. Because during the Peasants War, Luther's attitude and statements were criticized from all sides. His marriage as a former professional monk to a former professional nun further reinforced people's views of him. Just based on Martin Luther's desecration of the vow of chastity, the Catholic Holy See would absolutely not dare revoke his excommunication.
German Peasants War.
The Reformation movement initially struggled to advance, so the reformers went to the countryside to mobilize peasants. At that time, the Holy Roman Empire's overall illiteracy rate was 80%. The illiteracy rate in rural areas was almost 100%, so peasants were easiest to fool. When the peasant movement flourished, the reformers secretly rejoiced. However, mobilizing marginalized people also meant risking loss of control. If the acts of smashing, grabbing, burning, and killing at the start of the peasant movement could barely be tolerated, then later, when groups of peasants picked up weapons, gathered in mountains, and established armed strongholds, when they confronted the authorities, even the reformers had to brutally suppress the peasant movement. This created the unique spectacle of reformers killing reformers. The peasant movement started in Martin Luther's name. Then it was betrayed by Martin Luther. It was a bloody tragedy of slaughtering living people. The Reformation movement was also thus severely set back, falling into a trough. But the great scholars of the Reform movement were indeed exceptionally intelligent. They quickly found a new opportunity, abandoning the grassroots approach and turning to the elite approach. They let the secular princes clear obstacles and charge forward for them. Therefore, just based on the peasant movement's banditry of smashing, grabbing, burning, and killing, the Catholic Holy See would absolutely not revoke his excommunication.
The emergence of secular princes.
Secular princes rose to power by suppressing the peasant movement. They became regional overlords. Meanwhile, the co-lord of all under heaven, the Holy Roman Empire, was in decline and nearing its end. This situation is very similar to China's spring and autumn and warring states periods. So, by applying the situation of the Joe Son of Heaven, it's easy to understand the Holy Roman Empire. Thus, the Reformers, who had just suffered a major setback in the peasant movement, they began to flirt and send subtle hints to the secular princes. The secular princes naturally understood and tacitly agreed. They started playing the role of protectors of the Reformation. In fact, the secular princes had long planned to break free from the Holy Roman Empire's control. They had long coveted the vast Catholic Church properties. If they just declared support for the Reformation, their vested interests would be like pies falling from the sky. No, not pies, but mountains of gold and silver. So, whether they agreed with the Reformers' ideas, or even if they were Christians, they all unanimously supported the reform. The most typical example is Martin Luther's protector, Frederick III, Elector of Saxony. Frederick III, during the highly turbulent Reformation period, he used his superb political skills. He sought balance among multiple forces. These included the Holy Roman Emperor, the Holy See, nobles, and peasants. This was to protect his interests in the Saxon territory. He did not agree with Martin Luther's Reformation ideas. Therefore, he remained a Catholic his entire life. This is an enigmatic scene in the Reformation movement. The Reformers praised Frederick III as Frederick the Wise. This is quite comical. Frederick III's political opportunism belonged to opportunistic speculators. In reality, he ended up pleasing no one. He offended everyone. He became like Jubaji looking in a mirror, neither inside nor out. He also, consequently, missed the imperial throne. From the perspective of the ecumenical movement, Frederick III was an opportunist with no political integrity. Such a cunning person, once in power, the consequences would be unimaginable. In this Reformation movement, the most active bureaucrat was not a German prince. It was King Henry VIII of England. He opposed Martin Luther. For this, he even personally wrote books. But later, due to his personal, marital issues, he broke with the Holy See. He established the Church of England within his jurisdiction. This is known as the Anglican Church. He closed Catholic monasteries and confiscated Catholic Church property. This public robbery, what's the difference from bandits? The key is, he set this precedent. Other European princes followed suit. The astronomical wealth they plundered has not been sincerely apologized for or compensated for to this day. The result is, their descendants have inherited their original sin. After all, a life for a life, a debt for a debt, is only natural. And the creator of this original sin is, of course, the Reformation movement. Just based on their no apology, no compensation, bandit logic, the Catholic Holy See would absolutely not revoke Martin Luther's excommunication. Otherwise, it would be aiding evil and blurring right and wrong. The Holy See's stance on the descendants of the Reformation is probably this: either convert to Catholicism or apologize and compensate.
Epilogue.
From the Catholic Church's refusal to revoke Martin Luther's excommunication, the highly probable judgment is the Catholic Church characterized Martin Luther as the Antichrist. Let's see how the Bible aligns with this. John points out the Antichrist comes from among believers. This indicates they once belonged to the church, but they later betrayed the truth. The original words are, "Little children, it is the last hour. And as you have heard, that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come. By this we know it is the last hour. They went out from us, but they did not belong to us. If they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. But their going out showed that none of them belonged to us. 1 John 2:18-19. Regarding Martin Luther, whether he was the Antichrist, there's no need to continue debating. After all, concerning matters of the higher realm, humans don't decide, heaven decides.